The stagecoach rattled to a halt in front of the dusty town of Silver Ridge, Montana Territory, and Clara Bennett pressed her gloved hand against the window, wondering if this mistake would be her last. She had been a mail-order bride twice before, and both times she had fled before the ink dried on the marriage certificate. But desperation and dwindling funds had driven her to answer one more advertisement from a rancher named James Thornton, who promised a good home and honest work. The year was 1884, and women like Clara had few choices when family was gone, and society offered nothing but judgment for a woman alone. She stepped down from the coach, her worn brown traveling dress dusty from 3 days of hard travel, and scanned the wooden buildings that lined the main street. Silver Ridge was bigger than she expected, with a bank, a mercantile, a saloon, and even a small church at the far end. Men on horseback rode past, and a few women in bonnets hurried along the wooden sidewalks, their skirts swishing. Clara's heart hammered as she searched for a man matching the description in the letter, tall with dark hair, and a scar on his left cheek from a cattle branding accident. Miss Bennett. A deep voice spoke behind her, and she turned to find a cowboy standing there, hat in his hands. He was indeed tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. The scar was there, a thin white line that ran from his cheekbone to his jaw. His eyes were a startling blue, clear and direct, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Yes, I am Clara Bennett," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You must be Mr. Thornton, James," he said, and a slow smile crossed his weathered face. "Just James. Welcome to Silver Ridge. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was manageable," Clara replied, though her back ached and her head pounded from the constant jostling. She watched as he collected her 2 small trunks from the stagecoach driver, muscles flexing beneath his shirt. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, and something about that made her nervous. Her first intended husband had been a cruel drunk who revealed his true nature within hours of her arrival. The second had been a liar with 3 other wives scattered across 2 territories. She had learned to be cautious, to watch for signs of danger. James loaded her trunks into a sturdy wagon and helped her up onto the seat. His hands were calloused but gentle, and he did not hold on longer than necessary. That was a good sign. They rode out of town in silence for a few minutes, the wagon creaking as they headed west toward the mountains that rose like jagged teeth against the bright blue sky. "I should be honest with you right from the start," James said finally, his eyes on the dusty road ahead. "I know about your previous attempts at marriage." Clara's stomach dropped like a stone down a well. "How could you possibly know about that?" "Your second intended husband, Samuel Garrett, is my cousin," James said, and his jaw tightened. "He wrote to me bragging about how he had fooled another bride. When I found out he already had wives, I reported him to the territorial marshal. He is in prison now, serving 5 years for fraud and bigamy." The relief that washed over Clara was so strong it made her dizzy. "I thought no one would believe me. I ran in the middle of the night and never looked back." "You did the right thing," James said firmly. "Samuel always was a snake. As for your first attempt, I made inquiries. The man was known for his drinking and his temper. You were smart to leave both times, Clara. That took courage." She studied his profile, the strong nose and determined chin. "Then why would you want a woman who has failed twice? Most men would consider me damaged goods." James pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. The intensity in his blue eyes made her heart race. "You did not fail, Clara. Those men failed you. They were not worthy of the trust you placed in them. I believe in being straightforward, so I will tell you this now. I need a wife because running a ranch alone is hard work, and I want a family someday, but I will not force you into anything. We can take our time getting to know each other. If you decide I am not the man for you, I will give you money for passage wherever you want to go. No questions asked. But I hope you will stay, because I think third time is for keeps." The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a challenge. Clara had heard pretty words before, but something in the way James spoke, direct and honest, made her want to believe him. "I will stay for now," she said quietly, "and we will see what happens." They continued toward the ranch, and James pointed out landmarks along the way. The grasslands stretched endlessly, golden in the afternoon sun, and cattle grazed in the distance. After an hour, they turned down a narrow road lined with cottonwood trees, and then the ranch came into view. It was more than Clara had expected. A solid two-story house with a wide porch, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals that held horses and cattle. Everything looked well maintained, and the flower beds near the house showed someone had once cared about making it beautiful. "My mother planted those roses," James said, noticing her gaze. "She died 3 years ago. My father passed 5 years before that. I have been alone here since then, except for 2 ranch hands who help with the cattle." Clara climbed down from the wagon, and James carried her trunks inside. The house was clean but sparse, with simple furniture and bare walls. The kitchen was large with a good stove, and the parlor had a comfortable sofa and chairs. Upstairs, James showed her to a bedroom with a view of the mountains. "This was my sister's room before she married and moved to Oregon," he said. "You can have it for as long as you need. My room is at the end of the hall. I want you to feel safe here, Clara." "Thank you," she said, and meant it. The room was bright and airy, with a quilt on the bed and curtains at the window. It felt like a sanctuary after so much uncertainty. That evening, Clara cooked dinner while James tended to the animals. She found the pantry well stocked with flour, beans, salt pork, and dried vegetables. She made biscuits and gravy, simple but filling, and James ate with obvious appreciation. "You are a fine cook," he said, wiping his plate with the last biscuit. "Better than anything I have managed on my own." "Cooking for one person is easier than cooking for a crew," Clara said, but she smiled. It felt good to be appreciated for something so ordinary. They fell into a routine over the next few weeks. Clara managed the house, cooked meals, and tended a vegetable garden. James worked the ranch with his 2 hands, a grizzled older man named Pete and a young cowboy named Danny who could not have been more than 20. Both men treated Clara with respect, tipping their hats and calling her ma'am, and she began to relax. James kept his word about giving her space. He did not pressure her for affection or demand wifely duties. Instead, they talked in the evenings after dinner, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over the mountains. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to rope cattle from his father and bake bread from his mother. She told him about her own childhood in Ohio, about losing her parents to fever and having no siblings to turn to. The loneliness that had driven her west was something they both understood. One evening, about a month after her arrival, James asked if she would like to learn to ride. "The ranch is beautiful and you should be able to see all of it," he said. "Besides, if there is ever an emergency, you need to know how to handle a horse." Clara agreed, though she was nervous. She had ridden a few times as a child, but never well. James brought out a gentle mare named Daisy, a dappled gray with kind eyes, and spent an hour teaching Clara how to sit properly, how to hold the reins, and how to guide the horse with her legs. His hands steadied her waist as she mounted, and the warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. They rode slowly around the ranch, James on his big sorrel gelding and Clara on Daisy. The wind was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sage and grass, and Clara felt a freedom she had not known in years. When they stopped by a creek to let the horses drink, James helped her down, and his hands lingered on her waist for a moment longer than necessary. "You did well," he said, his voice slightly rough. "You are a natural." "I had a good teacher," Clara replied, and their eyes met. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility, and Clara realized with a start that she was falling in love with this quiet, honest cowboy. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing thunder that shook the house and lightning that split the sky. Clara lay in her bed, listening to the rain pound against the roof, and tried not to think about James sleeping down the hall. She had been so careful with her heart, so determined not to be hurt again, but James was different. He was patient and kind, and he looked at her like she mattered. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Clara was making breakfast when James came downstairs, his hair damp from washing. He looked at her across the kitchen, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Clara, I need to say something," he began, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I told you we would take our time, and I meant it. But I also need you to know that I care about you, more than I expected to when I first wrote that advertisement. You are smart and strong and beautiful, and I would be honored if you would consider making this arrangement permanent." Clara set down the spatula, her hands trembling. "I care about you too, James. You have shown me more respect and kindness in these weeks than anyone has in years, but I am afraid. What if I am not what you need? What if I fail again?" James crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. "You will not fail, Clara, because I will not let you down. I'm not like those other men. I keep my promises. If you marry me, it will be for keeps. 3rd time is for keeps, remember?" The echo of his words from that first day brought tears to her eyes. Clara looked up at this man who had given her safety and hope, and she knew her answer. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." James pulled her into his arms, and his kiss was gentle but full of promise. Clara melted against him, feeling something inside her unlock, some frozen part of her heart beginning to thaw. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "We will do this right," James said. "I will speak to the preacher today. We can marry next Sunday if that suits you. I want everyone in Silver Ridge to know you are my wife." The week passed in a blur of preparation. James bought Clara a bolt of cream-colored silk from the mercantile, and she sewed herself a simple but elegant dress. Pete and Danny spread the word, and neighbors Clara had not yet met stopped by to introduce themselves and offer congratulations. A widow named Mrs. Patterson brought a cake, and a young couple from the neighboring ranch brought a beautiful quilt they had made together. The kindness overwhelmed Clara. She had expected judgment, whispers about her failed attempts, but instead, the people of Silver Ridge welcomed her with open arms. James had told them her story, she learned, and they respected her courage. Sunday arrived with perfect weather, warm but not too hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers. Clara dressed carefully, her hands shaking as she buttoned the silk dress. She had pinned her dark hair up, and Mrs. Patterson had brought her a small bouquet of roses from James's mother's garden. The church was packed with people, ranchers and shopkeepers and cowboys, all dressed in their Sunday best. Clara walked down the short aisle on Pete's arm since she had no father to give her away, and James stood at the altar in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving her face. The preacher, a kind older man named Reverend Michaels, spoke about love and commitment, about second chances and faith. When he asked if Clara would take James as her husband, her voice rang out clear and strong. "I will." James slipped a simple gold band on her finger, and when he kissed her, the church erupted in applause. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. She had finally found her home. The celebration afterwards was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food contributed by everyone in attendance. There was roasted beef and fresh bread, pies and cakes, and someone brought a fiddle. As the sun set, couples danced in the grass, and James took Clara in his arms, spinning her slowly to the music. "Are you happy?" he asked, his blue eyes searching hers. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Clara replied honestly. "Thank you for not giving up on me. I knew from the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach that you were meant to be mine," James said. "I just had to convince you of it." That night, alone in the house after the guests had gone, James carried Clara over the threshold of his bedroom. He was gentle and patient, treating her like something precious, and Clara finally understood what it meant to be loved completely. They lay tangled together afterwards, and she traced the scar on his cheek with her finger. "Tell me how you really got this," she said. "The truth this time," James smiled. "A bull charged me when I was 17. I was showing off, trying to impress a girl at the county fair. Pete pulled me out of the corral before the bull could do worse, but I learned my lesson. Never turn your back on a bull, and never try to be something you are not just to impress someone." "I am glad you have that scar," Clara said. "It helped me recognize you that first day." "Then it was worth every stitch," James replied and kissed her again. The months that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. She and James worked side by side, building their ranch and their marriage. In the fall, they drove a herd of cattle to market in Helena and made enough profit to buy more land. In the winter, they spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking. Clara learned that James had a dry sense of humor and a love for poetry. Two things she never would have guessed from his rough cowboy exterior. Spring brought new calves and the hard work of branding and vaccinating. Clara helped where she could, and James taught her the business side of ranching, showing her the ledgers and explaining how he planned for the future. He valued her opinion, asking her advice on everything from which bulls to buy to whether they should plant more hay. One warm afternoon in May, Clara realized she had not felt well for several weeks. She was tired all the time, and certain smells made her nauseous. Mrs. Patterson, who had become a good friend, took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "You are with child, dear," she said gently. "I would bet my best china on it." Clara's hand flew to her stomach, and a wave of emotion swept over her. A baby. She and James were going to have a baby. She had hardly dared to hope for so much happiness. That evening, she waited until after dinner to tell James. They were sitting on the porch, watching the stars come out, and she took his hand and placed it on her still, flat stomach. "James, I am going to have a baby," she said. "Our baby." James stared at her for a long moment, and then a grin spread across his face so wide it looked like it might split. He let out a whoop that startled the horses in the corral and swept Clara into his arms, spinning her around. "A baby," he shouted. "We are going to have a baby." Clara laughed, dizzy with joy and motion. "Careful, you will make me sick," he set her down gently, his hands cradling her face. "I will take care of you, Clara, you and our child, I promise." "I know you will," she said, and kissed him. The pregnancy was not easy. Clara suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and the summer heat made her tired and swollen. But James was endlessly patient, bringing her cool water and fanning her when she was too hot to sleep. He hired a woman from town to help with the heavier housework, insisting that Clara rest. In September, Mrs. Patterson came to stay at the ranch, and a doctor from Helena arrived to oversee the birth. Labor started on a cool evening, just as the first leaves were beginning to turn gold. Clara labored through the night, and James stayed by her side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she screamed that she would never forgive him for putting her through this. At dawn, their son was born, a healthy baby with a strong cry and his father's blue eyes. James wept openly as he held the tiny bundle, and Clara watched through exhausted tears as her husband kissed their son's forehead. "What should we name him?" James asked, his voice choked with emotion. Thomas, Clara said. After your father, Thomas James Thornton. Thomas, James repeated and smiled. Welcome to the world, son. The first year with Thomas was exhausting and wonderful. He was a good baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. Clara loved watching James with their son, seeing this strong cowboy reduced to making silly faces just to hear the baby laugh. Pete and Danny doted on Thomas too, carving him wooden toys and taking turns holding him while Clara cooked dinner. On their second wedding anniversary, James gave Clara a beautiful locket with a tiny photograph of Thomas inside. So you can carry him with you always, he said. Clara gave James a new saddle she had commissioned from the leather worker in town, with his initials tooled into the leather. So you will think of home when you are out on the range, she said. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, and afterwards, as they lay in the dark, James said, "Do you remember when you stepped off that stagecoach 2 years ago? You looked so scared, like a rabbit ready to bolt." "I was scared," Clara admitted. "I thought you would be like the others, that I would have to run again." "I am glad you stayed," James said. "I am glad you trusted me enough to give us a chance. Third time is for keeps," Clara said, echoing his words from so long ago. "You promised me that, and you have kept your promise every single day since." "And I always will," James replied, pulling her close. The years passed with the rhythm of ranch life. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy with his father's height and his mother's dark hair. When he was 3, Clara gave birth to twin girls, Sarah and Emma, who had their father's blue eyes and their mother's stubborn determination. The house rang with laughter and occasional tears, and Clara often had to stop in the middle of her work just to marvel at the life she had built. James expanded the ranch, buying neighboring land and building a second barn. He hired more hands, and the Thornton Ranch became known throughout Montana Territory for producing quality cattle and horses. Clara managed the household and the books, proving to have a sharp head for numbers. Together, they were a formidable team. When Thomas turned 7, James began teaching him to ride and rope. Clara watched from the porch as her son sat proudly on a small pony, copying his father's every move. The twins played at her feet, building towers from wooden blocks, and she felt a contentment so deep, it was almost painful. Mrs. Patterson stopped by one afternoon for tea, as she often did, and found Clara in the kitchen making bread while the twins napped upstairs. "You look happy, dear," the older woman said, accepting a cup of tea. "I am happy," Clara said simply. "Happier than I ever imagined possible. When I came here 5 years ago, I was so broken. I thought I would never be able to trust anyone again, but James proved me wrong. He showed me what real love looks like." "He is a good man," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "And you are a good woman. You both deserve to find each other." That evening, after the children were in bed, Clara and James sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The mountains were purple in the fading light, and the air was sweet with the scent of hay. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked, taking a chance on a woman who had failed twice before. James turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw the same intensity that had captivated her that first day. "Clara Thornton, you have never failed at anything. You survived circumstances that would have broken a weaker person. You had the courage to keep trying, to keep hoping. That is not failure. That is strength." "I love you," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will love you until the day I die." "And I love you," James replied. "Third time is for keeps, remember? You are stuck with me forever." Clara laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I would not have it any other way." The summer Thomas turned 10, the ranch faced its biggest challenge. A drought settled over Montana Territory, and the grass turned brown and brittle. Water sources dried up, and cattle grew thin. James worked from dawn until long after dark, moving herds to better grazing and digging new wells. Clara stretched every penny, making simple meals and mending clothes until they could barely hold another patch. But they survived, as they always did, by working together and refusing to give up. When the rains finally came in September, the whole family stood in the yard and let the water soak them through, laughing and dancing. Thomas and the twins splashed in the puddles, and James pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her right there in the rain. "We made it," he said. "We always make it." "Because we have each other," Clara replied. The following spring brought good grass and healthy calves, and the ranch recovered quickly. James surprised Clara by announcing he had purchased a plot of land near the church in Silver Ridge. "What for?" Clara asked, puzzled. "For a school," James said. "Thomas and the twins need proper education, and so do the other children in the area. I spoke to the town council, and they agreed to hire a teacher if we provide the building." "I thought we could oversee the project together." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "James, that is the most wonderful idea." They spent the next year working with the community to build a small but sturdy schoolhouse. Clara organized fundraisers, and James donated lumber from his own land. When the school opened in the fall with 15 students and a young teacher from back east, the whole town celebrated. Thomas and the twins attended faithfully, and Clara loved hearing them recite their lessons at dinner each evening. On their 10th anniversary, James took Clara on a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children in Mrs. Patterson's capable care. It was the first time they had been alone together since the twins were born, and it felt like a second honeymoon. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in fancy restaurants, and walked along the waterfront holding hands like courting youngsters. "I never thought I would see the ocean," Clara said, watching the waves crash against the shore. "I wanted to give you something special," James said. "You have given me everything, Clara. A home, a family, a reason to work hard and plan for the future. You are my everything." Clara turned to him, this cowboy who had kept his promise, who had shown her what it meant to be truly loved. "And you are mine. Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself. Thank you for making me your wife." "Third time is for keeps," James said, and kissed her as the sun set over the Pacific. They returned to Montana refreshed and ready to dive back into ranch life. The children had grown in their absence, and Thomas proudly showed his father how he had helped Pete with the evening chores. Sarah and Emma, now 8 years old, had learned to bake bread with Mrs. Patterson, and they insisted on making dinner for their parents the first night home. The family sat around the table that evening, and Clara looked at each face, memorizing this perfect moment. Thomas, tall and serious like his father. Sarah, with her quick laugh and gentle hands. Emma, fierce and stubborn and kind. And James, her husband, her partner, her love. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, catching her watching him. "I am thinking about that day I stepped off the stagecoach in Silver Ridge," Clara said. "I was so afraid, so certain that I would fail again. But you told me third time is for keeps, and you were right. This life, this family, this love, it is forever." James reached across the table and took her hand. "Forever," he agreed. The years continued to pass, bringing challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Montana became a state in 1889, and the Thornton Ranch was there to see it. Thomas grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility and showing a natural talent for ranching. At 18, he married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, and James built them a house on the eastern edge of the property. Sarah became a teacher at the school her parents had helped build, and she loved working with the younger children. Emma surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to be a doctor, and she left for medical school in Chicago with her parents' blessing and financial support. Clara and James, now in their 40s, found themselves with an empty nest for the first time in years. The house seemed too quiet without the children's laughter, but they quickly filled the space with each other. They took long rides through the mountains, revisited old haunts in Silver Ridge, and spent lazy afternoons reading on the porch. "Do you miss when they were small?" Clara asked one evening. "Sometimes," James admitted, "but I also love this, just the two of us. It reminds me of those early days when we were first getting to know each other." "Except now I know all your secrets," Clara teased. "And you love me anyway," James said, pulling her close. "I do," Clara agreed. "More every day." Thomas and his wife gave them their first grandchild in 1893, a boy they named James after his grandfather. Clara cried when she first held the tiny baby, remembering the fear and hope she had felt when Thomas was born. James was equally emotional, his rough hands surprisingly gentle as he cradled his grandson. "Look at that," he said softly. "A whole new generation of Thorntons." Clara watched her husband with their grandchild and felt her heart swell with love. This man had given her everything she had ever dreamed of and more. He had kept his promise from that first day, and third time truly had been for keeps. More grandchildren followed over the years. Sarah married a kind farmer and had 3 daughters in quick succession. Emma returned from medical school with a degree and a husband, a fellow doctor who shared her passion for helping people. They settled in Silver Ridge and opened a practice together, and Emma gave birth to twin boys who reminded Clara of Sarah and Emma at that age. James and Clara's 20th anniversary arrived with spring, and the whole family gathered at the ranch to celebrate. The house was full of children and grandchildren, noise and laughter echoing through the rooms. Clara cooked for days, and James had a steer slaughtered for a proper barbecue. After dinner, as the sun set and the younger children played tag in the yard, Thomas stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said. "To my parents, who showed me what love and commitment really mean. Pa, you taught me to work hard and treat people right. Ma, you taught me to be kind and never give up. You both built something special here, and we are all better for it." Everyone raised their glasses, and Clara felt tears streaming down her face. She looked at James and saw he was crying too, something she had only seen him do a handful of times in their 20 years together. "I am so proud of our family," Clara said, her voice breaking. "Thank you all for being here. Thank you for making our lives so full." "Thank you for loving each other the way you do," Sarah said. "You gave us a foundation to build our own lives on." As the party wound down and the families headed to their respective homes, Clara and James found themselves alone on the porch once more, in the spot where they had shared so many conversations over the years. 20 years, James said, shaking his head. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "I know what you mean," Clara said. "Sometimes I still see that scared woman who stepped off the stagecoach, but mostly I see how far we have come." "You were never just scared," James said. "You were brave." "It takes courage to keep trying after being hurt. I knew that about you right away." "And you were patient enough to let me see the real you," Clara replied. "You never rushed me, never made me feel like I owed you anything. You just loved me." "I still do," James said. "More every day. You are my partner, my best friend, my everything." "And you are mine," Clara said. "Third time really is for keeps." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the stars come out. The ranch stretched around them, solid and enduring, a testament to their hard work and love. Clara thought about all the years behind them and all the years still to come, and she felt nothing but gratitude. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and Clara and James settled into the rhythm of grandparenthood. They still worked the ranch, though they had hired a foreman to handle the day-to-day operations. James spent his time mentoring Thomas and the other younger ranchers, passing on the knowledge his father had given him. Clara split her time between the ranch, volunteering at the school, and helping Emma at the medical practice with administrative work. On a crisp autumn day in 1897, Clara stood in the kitchen making apple pie from fruit picked from the trees James had planted years ago. She heard his boots on the porch and smiled, knowing he would come looking for a taste of the filling before she could get the pie in the oven. Sure enough, James appeared in the doorway, his hair now liberally streaked with gray but his blue eyes still as bright as ever. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and kissed the side of her neck. "Smells good," he said. "You always say that," Clara replied, but she leaned back against him. "Because it is always true," James said. "Everything you make is good, everything you do is good." Clara turned in his arms and looked up at him. "We did it, James. We built a good life." "We did," he agreed, "and I would not change a single thing. Well, maybe I would have kissed you sooner. I wasted too much time being respectful when what I really wanted was to pull you into my arms from day one," Clara laughed. "I needed that time. I needed to trust you first." "I know," James said. "And I would wait another lifetime if that was what you needed. You were worth every second." They stood there in the warm kitchen, holding each other, two people who had found their way through darkness to light. Clara thought about the woman she had been, broken and afraid, and the woman she had become, strong and loved. The transformation had not been easy, but it had been worth it. That evening, the whole family gathered for Sunday dinner, as they did every week. The table had been extended with extra boards to accommodate everyone, and the noise level was tremendous, with grandchildren ranging from newborns to 10-year-olds, all vying for attention. Clara moved around the table, making sure everyone had enough food, and James carved the roast with sure, steady hands. After dinner, the adults sat on the porch while the children played in the yard. Thomas was discussing breeding stock with James. Sarah was showing Clara a new quilt pattern she wanted to try, and Emma was telling her husband about a difficult case she had treated that week. The conversation flowed and overlapped, the sound of a family comfortable with each other. As darkness fell and families began to leave, each child and grandchild hugged Clara and James goodbye. Little James, now 4 years old, threw his arms around Clara's neck and said, "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, sweetheart," Clara said, her heart full to bursting. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road, James pulled Clara close. "That never gets old," he said. "No, it does not," Clara agreed. They stood under the stars, the same stars they had watched together for nearly 15 years now, and Clara marveled at the journey that had brought her here. She had answered an advertisement out of desperation, expecting nothing, and had found everything. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, as he so often did. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Clara said. "How blessed. I could have given up after the first failure or the second, but something made me try one more time. And that third time brought me to you. Third time is for keeps," James said, the words that had become their private motto. "I told you that first day, and I meant it. You are mine forever, Clara Thornton, and I am yours." "Forever," Clara echoed, and kissed him under the vast Montana sky. Years continued to add up like rings on a tree, each one marking growth and change. Clara and James celebrated their 25th anniversary, then their 30th. They became great-grandparents, watching their grandchildren start families of their own. The ranch thrived under Thomas's management, and the Thornton name became synonymous with quality and integrity throughout the state. James slowed down as arthritis set into his joints, but he still rode every day, refusing to let age keep him from the work he loved. Clara's hair turned completely white, but her step was still light and her mind sharp. They took care of each other with the ease of long practice, anticipating needs before they were spoken. On their 35th anniversary, Clara woke to find James already up, standing at the bedroom window and looking out at the mountains. She joined him, slipping her arm around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," James said, "for every day we have had together, for the family we created, for you, Clara, always for you." "I am grateful too," Clara said. "You gave me a life I never thought I could have. You gave me love and safety and a home. You kept your promise, James. Third time really was for keeps." James turned and cupped her face in his weathered hands. "It was not just about keeping you, Clara. It was about loving you the way you deserve to be loved. I hope I have done that." "You have," Clara said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Every single day you have shown me what true love means." They stood there, two people who had weathered decades together, and their kiss was tender with the knowledge of time passing but love enduring. That afternoon, the family gathered once more, spilling out of the house and onto the lawn. There were dozens of people now, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all connected by the love of two people who had taken a chance on each other in 1884. Emma stood to make a speech, her voice carrying across the crowd. 35 years ago, our mother stepped off a stagecoach in Silver Ridge, scared and hoping for one more chance. Our father looked at her and knew she was special. He promised her that third time would be for keeps, and he has kept that promise every day since. They have shown all of us what marriage should be, what family should be, what love should be. We are all here because of them, and we are all better people because of their example." The crowd applauded, and Clara buried her face in James's shoulder, overcome with emotion. When she looked up, she saw Thomas wiping his eyes, Sarah openly crying, and Emma beaming with pride. "I told you it would work out," James whispered in her ear. "You did," Clara agreed. "You told me third time was for keeps, and you were absolutely right." As the sun set over the Montana ranch that had been their home for 3.5 decades, Clara and James sat surrounded by the family they had built, the legacy they would leave behind. They held hands, their fingers interlaced with the ease of thousands of days of practice, and watched their great-grandchildren play in the grass where their own children had played so long ago. "No regrets?" James asked. "Not a single one," Clara said, "except maybe that I did not find you sooner." "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to," James said. "Everything that came before brought us to that moment on the stagecoach platform. I would not change it." Clara thought about the scared woman she had been, the failed attempts, the desperate hope that had driven her to try one more time. And she thought about this man who had seen past her failures to the strength beneath, who had been patient and kind and true. James Thornton had kept every promise he ever made to her, and in doing so he had given her the world. "I love you," she said simply. "Now and forever." "Now and forever," James echoed. "Third time is for keeps, Clara. Today, tomorrow, and all the years to come." The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their courtship, their wedding, the birth of their children, and every important moment since. Clara leaned her head on James's shoulder and breathed in the scent of him, leather and sage and home. This was where she belonged, had always belonged, and she finally understood that the third time had not just been for keeps. It had been everything she had ever needed, wrapped up in one honest cowboy who had kept his word. The mail-order bride who had failed twice before had finally found her happily ever after, and it was sweeter than anything she could have imagined on that dusty day in Silver Ridge so many years ago.